You've probably heard that whole grains are good for you, but what does that mean and what are they? Whole grains are grains that do not get processed in a way that removes the bran and germ of the grain kernel. This is different from refined grains, which are grains that are processed in a way that removes these nutrient-dense parts of the kernel, leaving just the endosperm. We will get into the specifics of what each of these parts of the grain are in a bit, but this difference in processing is essentially the difference between whole grains and refined grains. Some sources of whole grains pictured here are oatmeal, brown rice, farro, quinoa, whole wheat bread, whole grain cereals, and skinny pop. So we know that whole grains are less processed than refined grains, and we know that they are generally considered better for you than refined grains. But my question is, can opting for more whole grains than refined grains decrease your risk for developing type 2 diabetes, one of the most prevalent diet-related diseases in the world today? In 2019, approximately 463 million people were affected by type 2 diabetes, and it is predicted that by 2030, that number will reach 578 million and continue to grow at an exponential rate. But why is this disease so dangerous? Type 2 diabetes is caused by cells not responding normally to insulin. Insulin is released when blood glucose rises. So, if a person is constantly eating foods that quickly raise blood sugar, such as refined carbohydrates, the pancreas is working overtime to try and produce more insulin to keep blood sugar levels at an okay level. Over time, this can result in insulin resistance, where insulin receptors on cells aren't as effective as they need to be. This causes the pancreas to have to compensate by producing even more insulin. Over time, the pancreas can't keep up and blood glucose levels remain high. This leads to chronic hyperglycemia, when blood glucose levels are constantly too high. Over time, hyperglycemia can take an extreme toll on the body's macrovascular and microvascular systems, resulting in severe physical impairments like eye dysfunction and loss of vision, cardiovascular disease, and even amputation. This is a visual of how insulin insensitivity works. The glucose cannot penetrate the cell because the insulin receptors have lost their sensitivity to the hormone that opens up the channel for glucose to enter and be used for cellular processes. This traps all the glucose outside the cell in the bloodstream, leading to hyperglycemia. What is the logic behind my research question? Earlier, we talked about how whole grains are less processed than refined grains and keep intact the bran and germ around the endosperm as opposed to refined grains, where just the very easily digestible endosperm remains. The bran is the part of the kernel that is rich in fiber as well as other vitamins and minerals. The bran slows down the breakdown of starch into glucose, helping maintain a steady blood sugar level rather than causing sharp spikes like refined grains do. In other terms, the bran lowers the glycemic index of the grain. The germ is the core of the seed that is rich in healthy fats, vitamin E, B vitamins, phytochemicals, and antioxidants. The endosperm is the inner layer that has the carbohydrates, protein, and traces of vitamins and minerals. By removing the bran, more insulin is needed to compensate for the sudden blood sugar increases, which over time can lead to insulin insensitivity and hyperglycemia if only refined grains are consumed. Here is the study that assesses the association between total whole grain intake and type 2 diabetes risk. This is a prospective cohort study where over 158,000 women and over 36,000 men who did not initially have diabetes were given different amounts of whole grains by group and were checked over time to assess diabetes presence. The findings were that the group given the highest whole grain consumption diet had the least incidence of type 2 diabetes in following years. Total whole grain consumption was categorized into 5 equal groups of servings a day for 3 cohorts. Researchers adjusted this for lifestyle and other dietary risk factors for diabetes. The participants in the category that had the highest total intake of whole grains had a 29% lower rate of type 2 diabetes compared to participants in the category with the lowest total whole grain consumption. This adds to the evidence that higher consumption of total whole grains, such as whole grain breakfast cereal, oatmeal, dark bread, brown rice, added bran, and wheat germ, can result in a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. In this study, it was used to find if there is a link between the whole grain diet opposed to refined grain diet and gut health and inflammatory markers associated with type 2 diabetes. This is an observational study, and men and menopausal women were randomly split up into two diets, one with refined grains rich and one with whole grain rich. They were assessed at the end of 10 weeks. The whole grain group showed overall positive effects on gut microbiota, SCFAs, effector memory T cells, and the acute innate immune response. This study displays that whole grains are beneficial for reducing inflammatory factors that contribute to type 2 diabetes and help gut microbiota regulate glycemic control. Whole grains are also proven to help manage weight, limiting obesity, which is another risk for type 2 diabetes. In conclusion, whole grains can help prevent development of type 2 diabetes due to their bran and germ components that reduce blood sugar spikes, which can develop into hyperglycemia and type 2 diabetes